G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. Today we are going to be doing our MapKit introduction. It's following on from our CoreLocation tutorial that we did a couple of days ago. So what we're going to do is basically explain how MapKit is configured and do some things like how we can center the map and position the map and zoom the map. Now we're going to use the CoreLocation code that we used a couple of days ago, and if you've got the app, the members for Swift Almanac app, then you'll have access to that. If you have subscribed to Patreon for $2 a month, you get access to the source code, which you can download from GitHub. Otherwise, just follow along on the screen. If you're really keen, you can like the tutorial right now, and you can also subscribe to the channel so you get the rest of the MapKit series, which will cover annotations and overlays and probably even direction handling, which is a very nasty topic. In any event, let's get started with the basics and let's have a look. Okay, so we are in Xcode. I'm going to clone down a copy of the work we did earlier. Now, I've actually had a shocking time trying to had a shocking time trying to do this video. The first time I did it was almost flawless, except for the fact that I recorded my second screen rather than the screen where I was displaying all the source code, which wasn't very useful. The second time I did it, we had a change in the flight path here in Sydney, and planes kept flying overhead and destroying my sound. The third time I did it, I trashed the program, and when I opened the file, I didn't select the right size for the recording, and so it wasn't a 1920 by 1080. And finally, in my fourth attempt yesterday, what did I do wrong? Oh, I ran out of disk space, because these files in ScreenFlow are just absolutely massive, like gigabytes in size. And so after about 5 or 6 hours of trying to run this tutorial, I gave it away. So now it's Sunday and I'm a little bit more relaxed about it. So let's see what we can do. Now we're looking at the MapViewController, and this is the project that we finished off with CoreLocation. So we've got CoreLocation being saved in, our current position and location are being saved in this singleton for easy access. But in terms of what's going on with our MapKit and displaying the map, then there are a number of configuration things that we need to do. In the last tutorial, we just created the map view and placed it on the screens, and we gave it the same size as the whole screen, basically. So the things that we can add, there's a number of different map types that that you can create, and those are the names of all of them. You can play around with those to see what they look like, but we're going to be using the standard one. And then when you display the map, there are a number of different items that you can configure for the map. So you can configure whether or not it is showing these 6 things. Is it showing points of interest? Is it showing the user location, which is the little blue dot in the center of the map, or not necessarily in the center of the map, but that's where we'll put it later. Is it showing buildings? Is it showing the compass, the scale, and the traffic? Now, each one of these has a default value, but we're going to set them all to be true. Now, that's not to say that just because we've set them to true that they're going to be displayed. So, for instance, buildings, if you're like viewing from a long way up, then you're not going to see the buildings. You only see them when you're at the height of your you know, I don't know, camera or map or whatever you want to describe it. Is close and the like. So you'd have to be sort of driving along with like a sort of like a drone flying overhead sort of view. And the compass itself doesn't show up unless you're not pointing north. So in the default case, the map is always facing north no matter which way you're facing. So even if you request the compass, it won't show it. And there's been some other changes. The zoom scale only shows while you're zooming. It doesn't show while, like if you're just displaying the map. So there was some changes at the Worldwide Developers Conference last year in 2017. So, and there's a video thing on it on the Apple website. So if you want to, if you're trying to figure out why things aren't showing, and you've been requesting them, well, that's the reason why. So these are the things that you mainly want to configure about the map, and then the two things that you may want to show is you might want to show the user location, and that's whether or not the blue dot is being put in the middle of the screen or not. Some people want to get rid of that blue dot because it's also got like a little heading lamp at the front of it, and people want to get rid of the heading lamp, and you know, people want crosshairs, or they want, you know, a circle with like points pointing to where you are and all this kind of stuff. So if you want your own image there, you can do that as an overlay, and there's nothing to stop you from doing that, but you won't get the pulsing thing and the blue thing and all the rest of it. And shows points of interest, and that's things like, well, I'm in Sydney, so, you know, is the Harbour Bridge there? Is the Opera House there? You know, is your closest McDonald's or Starbucks there? I don't know if those are points of interest or not. And then there are other features which are basically features about how you can use the map, and they start with this is, and they're all Boolean. So basically, can you rotate the map? Can you scroll the map left and right? Can you zoom the map in and out? And the pitch, which is the angle with which you are looking at the map. So in the generic case, when you look at it normally when you open Google Maps, well, not Google Maps, but, you know, Apple Maps or whatever it's called, you'll basically be looking down directly on top, like you're in a helicopter floating overhead, or a satellite, depending on how high up you are, and that gives you that sort of 90 degrees, whereas the pitch could come down to 50 degrees or 45 degrees. There's a limit. You can't set it at 10 degrees. I don't know what the limit is, but you can't just sort of say, hey, put me at 30 degrees and see what happens. So there's these 4 things which are to do with how you display the zoom, how you display or how you can manipulate the map, or how the user can manipulate the map. And what have I missed? Pitch. And then, just like all controls, there is this overreaching is user enabled, or is user interaction enabled. So if you set that to be false, then you won't be able to scroll or rotate or zoom, even if you've set these to true, because there's no user interaction being allowed for. And then they have this other thing, which is the user tracking mode, and there's 3 options there. There's no tracking, and then there's follow the user, and there's follow with heading. So when you use follow with heading, then if you move the if you change the heading, which is basically the heading's the direction you're moving in, if you change the angle of the direction of the phone, then the map will basically always face north. So it sort of acts like it's a compass. And follow is just, it'll just follow you along, and none is you do it all yourself, right? So generally speaking, people either use follow with heading or none. So anyway, those are the basic things. Now we've got the iPhone 8 as a default, and what you need to know is that obviously your simulator does not have all the little gyro detecty things in it. So under the scheme and edit scheme, you need to allow, under run here, allow local simulation, and I've defaulted mine to Sydney. You can put it in San Francisco if you're an Apple fiend, or if you're any of these other locations. If you want, You can create a GPX file, add it to the project, and it'll put you somewhere near where you live if you've got a GPX file of your local area. Now, if you're running it on your phone, then you don't want to allow location simulation because your phone has all the things, surprisingly, that you need, and so you turn that off if you're doing a build for your own phone. So there we are in Sydney. Here's our user location set to true. And to prove me wrong, there you go. The compass is pointing north, even though it is pointing north. But there is no scale. And if I drag, yes, it's allowing me to scroll and all the rest of it. And I don't know how to do a pitch thing and all that kind of stuff on our map. But what we do want to do is we want to set this map so it's the center, and as the default location, we probably want to make it like how much of the map, how close to the position are we going to be viewing on our map. We could put ourselves in the center, but then we could still see the whole map of Australia, or we could put ourselves in the center and just see the streets within 200 or 300 meters of us. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create this center map method, and I'm Australian, so I spell center C-E-N-T-E-R, which is always a bit of fun because all the method names are spelling it different to that. And the basic way, or there's several different ways that you can set the map or redraw the map on the screen. The first one is to set the region and just to define what's essentially a circle of where you want the map to be displayed, where the diameter of the circle is the edges of the view or the map view. And you do that by just typing mapview.setRegion, and it takes this coordinate region, and you want it to be animated because it looks cool, right? So what is this coordinate region? And I just said, well, it's a circle. So and there is a make coordinate region with distance. We want to put the center coordinate, which is going to be our my CoreLocation .shared .current position, which, as you can see, is already a CL location coordinate 2D, and this is why we have that value there, because it means we don't have any optionals in here, and we don't need to run tests and things like that. We know that this value is always going to exist. And then we have this other latitudinal meters and longitudinal meters. We're going to make them both the same, so essentially we get a well, we do get a circle. And because when people zoom, you want to retain that value of the width or the zoom scale or whatever, however you decide to call it. We're going to create a property called map diameter, and oops, it's going to be a CL location distance, and it is in meters. So for our American friends, you have dipped out. You should have moved to the metric system decades ago. Apple's got you there, but the rest of your education system is letting you down. I spend half my time in America. I am bilingual with imperial and Celsius, Fahrenheit, miles, kilometers, feet and inches. Not so good on the pounds and kilos. I work in kilos there. So, and I always have a great time telling my American friends that they are behind with the times. Anyway, so we do this coord region, and we're going to set it to a diameter of 200 meters. And now when we run this, there you go. It's not quite as big as it was before. Yeah, I don't think it is. I think before it was a little bit bigger. And I'm not quite sure what the default setting is. Now, what's happened here is we have done this on the setup. So, you know, we've loaded the view controller, our MapView controller, and we have set the region to be, set the center of it to be this region. Now there are other ways of doing this. There are what's called a span, and a span is basically this distance between latitudes and longitudes, and that's very complex. If you do some searches on Stack Overflow, I think the different in between one point of, I can't remember which one, latitude or longitude. I think it's latitude. Latitude, no, I think it's longitude. I can't remember. Anyway, look, it's 111 kilometers is the answer, and most people don't want to display on their maps 111 kilometers, and creating, calculations based on percentages and fractions of 111 kilometers is not the ideal way, I don't believe, especially when you've got tools that allow you to do it in meters. So what we want to do, and what you typically want to do, is when you're walking along or moving or traveling or ride sharing or whatever it is with your map, you want the blue dot where you currently are to remain in the center of the map, which is to say you want the map to scroll while the center location remains in the center, generically speaking, unless you're touching it to move it around. So if we go to our MapViewController and we have our MapViewDelegate, there is a procedure which is, you would think, kind of ideal for this. And it's called did update user location. There it is there. And the problem with this method is that it's only available while you're in the foreground. So you've got to be in the foreground for it to be sent messages, and it's only good, it only sends messages, or sends these updates, if show user location, do this correctly, show user location is set to true. So if you got it set to false, you're not going to get any updates, despite, so even if you've got, you're doing just like you normally would do, but you decide you want your own crosshair rather than the blue thing that Apple provides, you can't use this method. And the only other time it does work as well is if you set that tracking mode equal to dot follow with heading. So if you do that, then again, it's still got to be in the foreground, but if it's in the foreground and you've got the follow with heading, then it'll still send messages. So it's that or this one. Now these circumstances aren't, they might be common, but then it's not ideal to be excluding delegate methods just on the basis of what your configuration is. So we're not going to use this method at all. I don't recommend you do, because what will happen is within CoreLocation there is a like identical similar function, which is did update locations, and obviously if you've updated your location, you are also updating the user location, because the user's probably holding the mobile phone, right? So so the thing is that you don't want to have some code in did update location for the cases when this isn't the case, and when it is the case, you put it here. People, it's just not, it's not a good idea, right? So in our did update locations, what do we need to do? So now, if you recall from our last tutorial, the first 80% of this call was throwing away locations which are inaccurate. They're either been delayed by time, or the horizontal accuracy is bad, etc. And then when we do have an accurate coordinate, we record it in our singleton. So after we've recorded it, what we want to do is we want to call that center map function. But the thing is that even though we're in a single view app for this demonstration, you could be in a multi-view app, and you probably are, So you're in a multi-view app, and you can't just be saying, hey, update this map if it's not being displayed, causes all kinds of problems. So what we need to do is find out what is the current view controller. And if you saw the previous tutorial, then you'd know that in our extensions we have this class function TopViewController, which returns the current TopViewController based on what the current situation is. So we get that, and then we say if the view controller is, so we're checking the type of the view controller here, we're not checking sort of the value of it. If VC is a MapViewController, then we want to let MapViewController equals VC, and we know it is a MapViewController, so we can do this force thing, and then we go as a MapViewController, and then what we can do is we just go MapVC dot center map. Oh, of course, we've got a guard statement, so we need to put the else return in here, so that if there is no view controller at all, it's dodgy, it will yeah, get rid of it for us. So VS, that's probably VC. Okay, so now at this point of time, if I just got my syntax correct, so at this point in time, there's really nothing that I can show you on the simulator, apart from the fact that it compiles and it's still running, which is always a good thing. But what you can do is you can build it and put it on your phone and then go for a walk, right? When you go for a walk, you'll see that the blue dot will be there, and as you walk along, you'll see that the blue dot will remain pretty much in the center of the screen, and the map will scroll underneath it and setting this up. Now, the problem with what we've just done is, so you know, pause it, go for a wander, make sure it works, come back. The problem with what we've just done is every time we get a location update, we're going to center the map. So this is okay behavior, but the problem is that if someone wants the ability to scroll or zoom, then when they scroll or zoom, they don't necessarily want the position to be in the center of the map. And so the two cases are a scrolling case and a zooming case. And I'm going to show you how to do the zooming case, and I'll tell you how to fix the scrolling case. But basically, the scrolling case, typically people want to see where they are and they want to know where they're going. So if you look at like a rideshare app like Uber or Lyft or something like that, when you pick your destination, it creates draws the points between where you are and where you're going, and it doesn't live where you are in the middle of the map. You know, it sort of expands out so you can see from one to the other, right? So if we're zooming, we want to turn off this center map sort of feature. And the same is true as if you're scrolling. You know, if you've got a, let's have a look at our simulator. If you've got a map like this, but you want to head over here, like you're going to scroll off, and every time there's an update, you don't want to be getting this, this map sort of scrolling back to the center position. You'll be having a fight with it, you see. So basically, while you're scrolling, or what normally happens with scrolling is the system, if you're scrolling, or if you start scrolling, the system normally sets up sort of a timer for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, so that allows you to get to the point where you want to see where you're going, and then after 3 or 5 seconds, it normally, or what's the typical behavior of these kind of apps is it will then call that that center map, and it'll just animate it back to the center after 3 or 5 seconds. So that's basically the two things that you can do, and I'm going to show you how to do the zooming effect right now. So basically, the thing with zooming is that let me get it. It's going to be in our MapKit delegate. So that's the one that we're not going to use. Now there are a couple that we are going to use. So there are these two MapKit delegate methods. One is called region. There you go. They're both there. Region will change animated, and this is basically this is the start of the zoom. And then there's another one called, which is the region, if I could just spell correctly, region did change animated, and that's once you've completed the zoom, then that's when it's going to start redrawing and things like that. So essentially what we want to do here is we want to detect when the zoom starts, and this point here we're going to detect when the zoom finishes. And of course when the zoom finishes, we also want to set this this map diameter to whatever the new zoom setting is, because otherwise we're always going to turn up at 200 degrees, and if someone wants to see 3 kilometers or 2 miles or whatever, they'll be stuck with this this static figure rather than a dynamic figure. So what we need is a private function to determine whether or not we're zooming or not. So we just say is MapZooming, and we're going to return a boolean, and then we just go let the view equals self dot mapView dot subviews 0, which is, hey, that's us, and the map, because it's detecting all these pinches and scrolls and touches on the screen, things like that, it has all these gesture recognizers that are already built into the map view. So a whole heap of stuff's already done for us, which is why the MapKit is awesome. So what we need to do is we need to get these gesture recognizers and figure out if any of them are being utilized. Okay, so we go if let gesture recognizer equals view dot gesture recognizers excuse me, for, and there's more than one, so we need to go through all of them. So for the for recognizer in gesture recognizers, if recognizer dot state equals dot began, or recognizer dot state equals dot end, then we want to return true. That means that we are in the process, it's all happening, and otherwise if we can't find anything like that, we're just going to return false. So now what we do want is we need a we could just keep calling this is MapZooming function. However, there's something else that we want to do a bit later, somewhere outside of the view controller. So in our map view, what we're going to do is we're going to create a, oh, hang on, that's a let variable. That's not correct. We're going to change that value. So so then up here we're going to have a property of our view controller. Are we zooming? Is zooming, which of course is a bool, and by default will be false because the default case is we are not zooming. And then if we go back to our delegates here, so this is basically going to say is zooming equals is map zooming. So basically whenever we get into this recognizer state, it's dot ended, there you go. So whenever we get into this state, we're going to get true, and otherwise we'll get false, right? And then once we have received a change, we want to go if we're zooming, or to be honest, if we have been zooming, if the last thing we did that caused this region to change was us doing a manual pinch zoom, then the map diameter is got to be equal to something. I'm not quite sure what it is yet. And then just to know that it works, we're going to put in this map diameter print statement so we can just see it here in the debugger. And then of course we need to set is zooming equal to false, because otherwise until we start another zoom in this, it will never update, right? So now the thing is, how do we figure out what is the new the new diameter of our map? Because we've either zoomed it in or zoomed it out. How do we get that as like pixels on a screen into like meters that we can save in our map diameter property, right? So as it turns out, there is a way that we can calculate this, and I got it from Stack Overflow, so you can have a look on Stack Overflow about this. But it's an extension for MapView, oh, not map item, MapView, and I'll just copy and paste it. Okay, so it's this extension which is a method, and it's called region in meters, and it returns a location distance which we already have been told is in meters. So we find the easternmost point of the map using these MapKit coordinate methods, and then we find the westernmost point using the exact same thing, except it's the maximum x coordinate rather than the minimum x coordinate. And then well, and then basically there is this other method called MK meters between map points, and we pass the first point and the second point, and it returns meters. So it's pretty straightforward once you know how. So our map diameter is simply the map view that we've been passed as a parameter in this region did change animated dot our extension region in meters. So so what we've done here is we've detected that there's a zoom starting, and when the zoom finishes and the map's redrawing, we are resaving this map diameter. And so when we go to redraw the map with our center map method in our view controller, this map diameter is the new map diameter rather than the default one of 200, and so it'll change. Now again, this is another point where you can pause the video and run the code and run it on your phone and play around zooming and see what happens. Now I just compile this to make sure that it does build. That's all good. Aha, there you go. This time we've actually got it as 200 meters, so that's all really cool. And I don't know how to do a pinch on the simulator, so I can't really test it for you. But there is one more thing that we need to do, and that is in the this CoreLocation change. We don't want, as I said, as we're zooming, for the map to be redrawing every time. Now, if you recall back to the CoreLocation, why won't that update? If you recall back to our CoreLocation tutorial, the previous one, we set the distance filter equal to be this KCL distance filter none, right? And really what we should have here is we go let K production Boolean equals, we're not in production, so it'll be false, and this distance filter is equal to K production. Now, if it's true, then that should be something like 10 meters. Otherwise, it should be none, right? But basically what none means, if you didn't watch the last CoreLocation tutorial, none means that you move this a millimeter and it's going to give you a CoreLocation update. Whereas 10 means that it's got to move 10 meters before it'll think that it's a substantial move. So so basically, if you're scrolling and holding your phone, or you're zooming and holding your phone, the phone's going to move and you're going to get an update, and then the update's going to try and reposition the phone in the center, or the position where you are in the center, and that's going to stuff up your zoom. So what we need to do is, while we are doing this, if the view controller is the MapViewController, is we want to check this if is zooming. So if mapVC.is zooming, well, if it is zooming, we don't want to do anything. So what we want to do is put a not here. So if we're not zooming, then that's when we want to do this center map test. And that is basically it. I'm going to leave it as an exercise for you to set up a timer. We've got this other timer down here for updating the location, so it basically works the exact same way. And here in the MapKit, basically what you want to do is you want to determine whether or not you're scrolling or not, as opposed to is zooming. It's pretty straightforward to figure all that out. And then at the end of the timer, basically every time you go through this region, you reset the timer if it already exists, and then when the timer does complete, then the completion routine simply calls this MapViewController.centerMap, and it'll center the map at the end of your 3 or 5 seconds. That's basically what you need to do. So that is it for our first MapKit lesson. That's it, guys, for our introduction to MapKit and getting MapKit up and running. In the next tutorial, we're going to be looking at geocoding and reverse geocoding, as well as setting pins, which are called annotations, to the map. You've probably learned something. Best thing to do is to like the tutorial, like this YouTube video, and also, if you're not already, you don't want to miss out, so subscribe to the channel. Slowly building up our numbers. We get a lot of good feedback from people, which is great. If you've got any questions, put a comment below, and of course you can help out by subscribing to the channel on Patreon. $2 a month gets you access to our source code, and yeah, we will see you shortly for more exciting MapKit lessons. Cheers.